Well, there are darlings of the museum world and people who are the chosen voices, which is literally doing the same thing to Native exhibits in museums as historians have done all along, which is, choose one narrative and use that one and ignore the rest. And so we've shifted from having our stories told by white men with PhDs in history to, I might get in trouble for this, to Native men who have, a vested interest in the narrative and in keeping control of that narrative. And nowhere, was there any mention of the fact that women really started the protests and the actions around protection of Chaco. And that women, well, we all know the women have been at the forefront of most of these major actions in the last, at least 20 years, Standing Rock. But certainly in New Mexico, the Saving Chaco, Protecting Chaco, and also water protectors and land defenders all over the Southwest, they predominantly are women. But that's not talked about because we have these men's voices and these voiceovers. And then the rest of the exhibit, there was some interesting stuff. There was folks talking about, language preservation and language retention. And then there was some other, like I said, a lot of arts and crafts, and stuff that I would say is typically present in exhibits about Native people. In almost every museum I've ever gone to that's not Native run, that's what you get. And then in the very back, they had a big monitor and they were showing Res Dogs, a clip from Res Dogs. So there were some parts of it that I thought were pretty well done. And then some parts of it I thought were just like business as usual. And here we are in this natural history museum on the same side as the dinosaurs. And then the next day or a few days later, I had to go back with the group I was with. And I was walking on the same side of the museum, and I was headed for the cafe to get a drink. And as I'm walking along, all of a sudden I look up and I see on the right-hand side, there's this video. And then I see Melanie's face. And I was like, what? Like, there's all these people I know all of a sudden showing up in this museum. And it was the entrance, like in the main hall of the Field Museum, on the lake side, so the same side as the cafe. There's an entrance to the hall that's called Ancient Americans, and there's this video on loop, and it's a bunch of Native people who I think are saying hello in their languages. And so I stood there because I had to see it loop around again so I could get a video of it. And like, I knew a bunch of the people who were speaking. And so then I thought, okay, I took the video because I had to show it to Melanie. And then I was like, well, since I'm here, I might as well just go into the exhibit. And that was literally the exact same thing I have seen at every natural history museum across the country, which is, you've got your Mayans, you got your Aztecs, you got your Incas, you got your pictures, and, a bunch of white people talking about why, pyramids were built like that. And it was like, God. Why are we still relegated to museums of natural history? Why are we still treated, like you said, like we're extinct and like, that's just the surface of the representation of Native people. we're not even talking about the millions and millions of things that were stolen from Native people. I mean, when you're talking like Native voices, you're on Native land. That was the big sign that you see when you're going into this exhibit. No one talks about how half of the stuff that they excavated from the Four Corners area from my ancestors, from my ancestral communities, was shipped to Scandinavia. No one talks about the skeletal remains of people, of our ancestors, of our relatives that are locked in the basement of multiple museums across the country. I mean, there's an incredible amount of harm that was done by museums, and there's like this much harm reduction work being done right now. Like there was some signs that in both of those exhibits that things had been removed because of their sensitive nature and because they were possible NAGPRA. They didn't say NAGPRA, but possible provenance issues. And so what they're basically saying is, oh shit, we put something out for public display and somebody came and saw it and said, you stole this from my people. Now you need to give it back. Like, so even though they're acknowledging, like they could have just taken out these cases, they didn't. They put an acknowledgement in there that is supposed to be some sort of harm reduction. But really, you can't even imagine what these museums have in the basement. And, it's come out a little bit over the last, 30 years since NAGPRA was passed, about how many things these museums, and particularly the ones associated with Ivy League schools, Harvard and Princeton and Brown. I mean, they have stuff that I can't, that it scares me to think about.
Didn't we talk? There was a story that came out, was maybe like August of last year or like early fall. Someone was cleaning out like the anthropology department at Harvard, and they found all of these hair samples.
Yep, from kids.
Like 300. It was like a lot of hair samples. And they interviewed like all of the Native people that they could find at Harvard. I'm laughing because it's so absurd. They interviewed the Native people at Harvard, including staff and students and faculty, to like, well, I guess they consulted them to be like, what should we do with this? But they were also like, hey, this person has the same last name as you. There's like a Yazi, for example, in the sample. They're like, is this person your relative? And it's like, there's actually like laws about how you go about returning these items where they belong. Like maybe you shouldn't be like traumatizing Native people who work for you by just bringing them into some sort of informal meeting and asking them if like this stolen hair belongs to one of their relatives. Like you're Harvard, you own the world, like you have billions of dollars.
Yep.
Handle this correctly. And so anyway, that's reminding me of that. That was happening last year. But going back to the video of me, so you shared the video with me, and I was like, oh my God, wow, I don't ever remember doing this. Like this, I don't know, where does this video exist? And I was like, where was this taken? And I was like, oh, I did a Navajo language class at the Institute of American Indian Arts. So I was an employee at the time at IAIA in the like continuing education, like community outreach portion of IAIA. And I decided to take, because employees could take classes for free or like reduced tuition. I don't remember, but I wanted to take a Navajo language class. So I think that was in 2007 was when that video was taken. Again, I don't remember ever recording that. But it was also, again, they identified me correctly, right? My name is Melanie K. Yazi, but as also like, shouldn't you ask me permission to use my image, especially if it's like in the main hall of the Field Museum? And I don't know why this video is at the entrance to ancient history or whatever, because that was from 2007.
Yep.
For some people, 2007 might be ancient history, but it's not. I don't know. The whole thing is just so bizarre.